Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 164, Holo Pursuits.
Welcome to another edition of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Each week on Mission Log, we talk over a Star Trek story, sifting through for messages and meanings and elements that might be beneficial in this 21st century world in which we live.
This week, Holo Pursuits.
Hello!
Hello!
that never gets old for me. You know, so it's hollow and challah. Like the bread.
Which I love.
Drives my wife insane, though, because she likes to use it. She likes to cook with it. She likes to do things with it. Mm-hmm. And every time she says, will you go get me a loaf of challah? Yeah, there's absolutely nothing I can do. Except make that
noise. It looks like it's hollow with holo, because, you know, the holodeck, H-O-L-O, this is, of course, H-O-L-L-O-W. So we just, so many versions.
And yet, do you think those two things might have anything to do with each other?
I'm going to say that be related.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll find out when we talk about it. But we got a lot of stuff to do before we actually start talking about that. Got to talk about some other things, like how people can get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod. I'm doing a weird read on that.
That's good.
Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love that. 323-522-5641 is the number to call. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. All kinds of upcoming episodes coming up. But right now, there's trivia coming up right now.
Thank you, Ken. Today's episode, Holo Pursuits, was written by Sally Caves. Now, Sally's real name is Sarah Higley. She is an English professor at University of Rochester in New York, and this is her first and only contribution to The Next Gen, though we will see her name again in Deep Space Nine. But in fact, those are her only produced scripts at all, though she has been published for fiction writing in journals and books a few times before. She submitted her story idea through an agent and worked with both Ira Stephen Bear and Melinda Snodgrass to hone down the 6 different plots she had pitched into one story. Now, it was directed by Cliff Bole. We've talked about Cliff Bole before, and today's episode got an Emmy nomination for hairstyling.
Oh, I will say the hair was really great in this episode.
It really stood out. We have a lot of hair.
Amazing.
Notes. Yeah, 45 minutes remaining of hair notes in today's podcast. Some fun props to point out. The glass we see in 10 Forward was first seen in Star Trek 3. They just hang on to their glasses as long as they can. And the test device that Chief O'Brien uses in the transporter room is actually a real-world device used by the Navy. It's called a sonobuoy. And yes, many people have pointed out that in the holodeck, Wesley is dressed as the Blue Boy. That is Thomas Gainsbourg's painting from 1770 that now hangs in the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. The portrait is 4 feet tall, just about life-size, and is believed to be a rendering of Jonathan Butal, the son of a wealthy hardware merchant. Now, Dwight Schultz as Lieutenant Reginald Barclay. This is a role created for him. He was a fan of Star Trek, and like Whoopi, he let it be known that he wanted to be on the show. Only this time he told Whoopi they were working on a movie together, and she let the production know. Schultz is definitely best known for playing Howling Mad Murdoch on the A-Team, and he even had a cameo in the 2010 A-Team movie along with co-star Dirk Benedict. In fact, the name Reginald Barclay is used for Schultz's cameo scene. Now, he has said in interviews that he was a fan of the original Star Trek and really got a positive view of the future, that he respected Star Trek's ability to take on the big issues where the A-Team was more of a cartoon. He said that he would like to be more like Murdoch in real life, but he is really more like Barclay. And it's also pretty well known that for a number of years, Schultz has been an active conservative political commentator and the host of his own political podcast, Howling Mad Radio. In more recent years, he's done a tremendous amount of voice work, and we will see him return to Star Trek.
In the 24th century, a socially awkward diagnostics engineer was sent to the Enterprise by a commanding officer who was tired of dealing with him. This man promptly escaped into the holodeck. Still, if you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find him, maybe you can get a day's work out of Reg.
Prologue. Lieutenant Barclay is one tough customer of 10 Forward, and Guinan is telling him she doesn't want any trouble. Trouble follows Barclay, like the trouble he's about to start with his commanding officer, Geordi LaForge. LaForge tells Barclay that he's on duty and needs to get back to his post. Barclay shoves him back, literally, and that's too much for Commander Riker. He tells Barclay that his shoving of his superior officer is insubordination. Barclay offers a toast to insubordination, downs a shot, and in a flash has Riker in a headlock, calling him a pretty boy and telling him to tell Picard that if he's got a problem with Barclay, he should come see him himself. All of this is seen by Counselor Deanna Troi, who is visibly turned on by Barclay's power. That'll have to wait, though. Barclay's called to Cargo Bay 5. He orders... What? He orders the holodeck to save his program and heads to Cargo Bay 5. In the cargo bay, the real LaForge and Riker are talking about Broccoli. That's Wesley's nickname for Barclay that's sort of spreading around the Enterprise. Geordi is sick of Barclay. He's always late, his work is mediocre. He wonders how a guy like that even made it through the academy. Riker thinks they should have a talk with Captain Picard about Barclay. Though, and Lieutenant Duffy just found a broken seal on some container full of some sorts of samples of something. I wouldn't worry about it. In walks Lieutenant Barclay and immediately tries to hide from Riker and LaForge. LaForge tells him they're having an intermittent problem with the anti-grav unit, fix it, and also, you suck at being Starfleet. Off to work on the anti-grav unit, Barclay is stopped by Commander Riker. I'm tired of reading reports about how much you suck at being Starfleet. Riker leaves the cargo bay, shaking his head, as we head to the opening credits. Act 1. It was tissue samples in that container, by the way, donated by the Micolax for shipment to Nami 4. The samples could help kill an outbreak of Corellium fever on that world. I wouldn't worry about it. A little bit more about Barclay. He's timid, outside the holodeck. It wasn't just being dressed down by Riker and LaForge. Having spent time working on the anti-grav unit, he's still nervous in his speech. But he tells LaForge that the anti-grav unit should be good now. Except it's not. It goes wibbly-wobbly during Geordi's test of the unit, and another seal gets broken on another can of Micolax. Without saying so explicitly, Geordi reminds Barclay how much he sucks at being Starfleet, and Barclay goes back to trying to figure out what's wrong with the anti-grav unit. In the captain's ready room, Picard is looking over Barclay's file. Boy, does this guy suck at being Starfleet. Geordi has asked him to have him transferred off the Enterprise. Broccoli makes him nervous. Yes, he and Riker just told the captain of Wesley's nickname for Lieutenant Barclay. I wouldn't worry about it. Still, Picard says, cut that out. Also, ever thought about being a leader to this guy? Picard denies the transfer request. If he's not Enterprise material, it is now Geordi's job to make him Enterprise material. Let's see if we can't get him to not suck at being Starfleet. New task in mind, Geordi stops back by Cargo Bay 5, where Barclay... Reg, all of a sudden, is still poring over that pesky anti-grav unit. He can't figure out the problem, but he's got some other ideas. Hey, cool man, whatever. Listen, Reg, why don't you come to the morning meeting and hang out with the cool officers? Reg is nervous, but Geordi insists, in a friendly way. See you at 8 in the morning. Cut to 8 in the morning, and Barclay is, of course, late. 7 seconds or so, but still... The trip to Nami 4 will be fairly dull, so engineering will have plenty of time to tech the tech. Young Mr. Crusher will be shadowing the engineering team. Also, Lieutenant Barclay has been working on the anti-grav thing. Why don't you tell everybody about it, Reg? Reg? Hello, is this thing on? Reg tries to say what his findings were and his plans are, and WizKid Wesley steamrolls him. Verbally. Geordi kind of corrects Wes and they move on. Counseling. That's what Reg needs. He goes to see Counselor Troi to talk out his frustration. He wishes he had told Wesley to mind his own business. He seems so much more comfortable with Counselor Troi. But why wouldn't he be? She's a hologram. When she goes to kiss him, he decides on a more idyllic setting. She is the goddess of empathy. They are in a meadow, And now about those lips. In 10 forward, Geordi, Wesley, Data, and Lieutenant Duffy, the one who found the broken seal earlier, but probably not important, they're talking over the Barclay situation. Yes, Wes, you're smart, but I'm doing something with Broccoli, so let the guy talk, okay? Also, we're not supposed to call him Broccoli anymore. Duffy goes to take a sip of his drink, and hey, this is weird. His glass is solid, but it seems to have not been for a moment. It's got Duffy's handprint in it, and it's leaking. Act 2. Science! Data says the structure of the glass has been altered at the atomic level. Neither Geordi nor Data know why this would have happened. Data says the most likely reason is that the glass came into contact with an unshielded power source. They'll all have to be checked. All 4,000 of them. And Geordi knows just the guy. He hands the task off to Reg, who was about to do that anyway. No, seriously, as part of his anti-grav unit investigation. That doesn't seem to make any sense either. Data thinks the two incidents may be linked somehow. On the bridge, Data, LaForge, and Barclay are talking over the issue of the glass and the issue of the anti-grav unit with Commander Riker. Geordi says he won't know whether they need to put in for major repairs until Barclay finishes his checks and tests. Data tells Riker that it was Barclay who made the possible connection between the two incidents, which it wasn't, but whatever. Likely to boost Barclay's sense of self, Captain Picard comes over to toss him a couple of softball questions. Then he says, I'm looking forward to seeing your report, Mr. Broccoli. Barclay. You knew it was going to happen, but it doesn't make it any easier when it does. In 10 forward, Geordi is discussing his Barclay situation with Guinan. He just doesn't fit in. Guinan suggests that fitting in might be for losers. You don't understand, Guinan. He's always late. He's nervous. Nobody wants to be around him. Guinan points out that if she felt nobody wanted to be around her, she'd probably be late and nervous too. Geordi goes to find Barclay. In the holodeck. He doesn't radio. He doesn't knock. He just barges into Barclay's fantasy life, where he finds a sort of rococo Dr. Crusher on a swing, her foppish idiot son eating pie, and Reg fighting off the Three Musketeers, personified by holodeck representations of Data, Picard, and Geordi himself. It's a great fight, though it ends with Barclay realizing, oh, the real Geordi has seen the whole thing. In 10 forward, Reg is offering LaForge his resignation, though Geordi's actually being understanding. Hey, I get the whole holodeck thing, though recreating people you already know is kind of weird. Still, Geordi says as far as he's concerned, what happens in the holodeck stays in the holodeck. You're just shy. Still, he should probably talk to someone. A real someone. Reg needs to go see Counselor Troy. That's an order. Transporter Chief O'Brien has called LaForge. New engineering issue. The transporter is breaking things that are getting transported. Hey, I wonder if this will have anything to do with the glass in the anti-grav unit. Act 3. The Enterprise will reach Nami 4 in 22 hours, and this transporter issue is kind of a big deal. Luckily, it's only this transporter room that's having the issue, but who knows whether it'll spread. It's also unclear whether this is tied to the other issues. They'll have to have Barclay look into it at 1400 hours, after his session with Counselor Troy, which is about as awkward as you would expect. Reg pretends that a simple suggestion that he breathe was a big help and gets out of her office as soon as possible. 1400 hours and Barclay is not on the bridge for his report, and that tears it as far as Riker's concerned. He heads to Holodeck 2 to retrieve the lieutenant with Geordi and Troy tagging behind. Listen, you need to know that things in the holodeck are kind of weird. Riker says he does not care. He barges in, and there they are in the meadow, face to face with the Three Musketeers and the idiot Wesley. Act 4. Riker is not amused. Geordi says he doesn't think there's any rule against using real people in the holodeck. Riker says there ought to be. He orders the computer to discontinue the program, but Troy belays that order. Real life is obviously tough for Barclay. Wreck his escape, and you could wreck the guy. Riker relents, though he does discontinue the image of the comically short, helium-inhaling sounding replication of himself. The Musketeers are decidedly unhelpful in finding Barclay, and Geordi, Riker, and Troy go off to look for him. Troy is lecturing Riker about not taking it all so seriously, until they bump into the goddess of empathy. She orders the computer to terminate the program and order Riker belays. Where's your sense of humor? On the bridge, whoa, that was weird. The Enterprise just bumped itself up to warp 7.25. The matter-antimatter injector's locked for a second. Hey, I wonder if that'll have anything to do with the glass in the anti-grav unit and the malfunctioning transporter. Picard wants Geordi to look into it, and bring Barclay in on this too. They better find him quick. Oh, there he is, asleep with his head in the lap of Rococo Beverly. On the way to engineering, Geordi is telling Reg again that he gets the whole holodeck thing. Heck, he fell in love in the holodeck one time. But you gotta know when enough's enough. Reg says the people in the holodeck are more real to him than real people, except maybe for Geordi. Geordi says he needs Reg in the real world. In engineering, injectors aren't responding to diagnostic commands. Reg thinks they should drop out of warp. But they can't. The mechanism is physically jammed, and suddenly warp is increasing. She's accelerating out of control. And there's nothing Geordi can do. Act 5. At the current rate of acceleration, the Enterprise will break apart in 15 minutes or so. So they got about that long to figure out a fix or, die. Duffy has a dumb idea. Wes has a dumb idea. Let's recap. A screwed-up glass, a hinky anti-grav unit, a malfunctioning transporter, and the warp injector's going nuts. What is the connection? Barclay thinks the problem might not be a thing, but a person. The only connection between the failing systems is that they're all used or maintained by the engineering crew. Hey, wait a second. It's Duffy and those busted cans of Micolax. Invidium used to be used in medical containment fields and might still be by the Micolax. Duffy touched the busted containers and apparently everything else on the ship. Now the Invidium is wreaking havoc. I say we kill Duffy. Or fix the problem, which they do at the very last second. Everybody helped, even the captain, but there's no doubt they couldn't have done it without Reg. It's a shame then that he'll be leaving them. On the bridge, all of senior staff and Wesley are assembled to hear his last goodbye. It's been a tough decision, but he has to go. He knows he'll always be welcome there, which makes it particularly difficult to leave. Captain Picard tells Barclay that it was a pleasure to serve with him, and Barclay tells... What? Barclay tells the computer to end and erase all of his holodeck programs. Except for one. The end.
Hey, how about a nice, cool glass of Micolax after the show, Ken?
When it's time to relax, it's Micolax, I think. I think that was Miller, actually, when it's time to relax. And for great times, make it Centauri times. And I don't remember what Michelob was.
I don't remember.
Yeah. They weren't the one with the bull, were they? No, that was Schlitz.
That was Schlitz. Yeah. Don't mix up your Schlitz.
Don't say beer, say bull.
Right. Hey, so I wanted to spend a chunk here, if we could, to talk about how good Dwight Schultz is. Okay. And not just here, but in a lot of shows. I mean, I remember being, 9, 10, something like that, when the A-Team came on. Mm-hmm. And he was just great, particularly to a 9 or 10-year-old, because here's the crazy guy doing crazy things. And he was playing way over the top, but the risk would be somebody playing someone who had no grounding in reality at all, or that could be seen as parody or making fun of somebody. And there's always, I feel like, in his characters, a glint of humanity in the eyes. And you can see that there's more to the character than just those surface traits. And that's really not an easy thing to do. And you can see why he would endear himself to audiences with that ability. This is a perfect episode where here's a guy who, on the surface, we see the traits. He has this stutter. He doesn't look people in the eye. He's kind of fidgety with his hands. And all of these things could just come across as a guy imitating somebody who is nervous. Yeah. But I feel like he is good enough, he's strong enough an actor that you really just immediately feel some empathy with him, and really get him in a way that doesn't require everything to be explained. Yeah. There's
Yeah, it would be easy to do like the whole affectation thing, right? Where he has a twitch or he has he doesn't even have a stutter. That's the thing. I mean, it's not, this is a guy who is genuinely uncomfortable in his skin. And, right. And I think genuinely is the word there. I didn't get the sense that he was playing that in a way, because he never really comes out of it. Like even in the parts where things are getting better, he's still not 100% comfortable. He does a very good job. Yes.
It's also worth pointing out here that there are some critics who have accused Star Trek through this episode of kind of pointedly commenting on the perception that Star Trek fans are socially awkward, can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, and it has definitely gone on the record that people working on this episode flatly deny it. In fact, Michael Piller has said that a big part of himself is Barclay. So, this was about this character and about this incident. There wasn't any sort of underhanded, nothing that's sort of taking a jab at this sort of popular but unfair idea about Star Trek fans lost in fantasy.
Yeah, you can't help but see it, though.
I know.
I mean, honestly, what I thought of was the Shatner skit on Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. The Get a Life skit, and right, it's an unfair thing because people, well, whatever. We can have a whole big Star Wars, Star Trek discussion at some point if you want to, and which one is actually the one to get lost in, and which one is better, and why we all do it anyway. I had a talk with a friend of mine the other day who was like, I offhandedly said, because as we record this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make this very off the moment. As we record this, we're about a week and a half away from The Force Awakens coming out, and I said, a movie that Star Wars fans have been waiting for their whole life, and I had to explain to him I was 7 when the first one of those movies came out, and so really ever after you are always spending your whole life waiting for the next sort of Star Wars thing. Right. We get lost in different fantasy things for different reasons, I suppose. It's weird, though, when people sort of criticize you for the Star Trek one, because at least it was trying to do good, not just blow stuff up.
Ooh.
Well, I'm not saying Star Wars doesn't have... I just said I've been waiting my whole life for the next Star Wars movie, whatever the next one is. Right. At the same time, let's move on.
Yeah. Well, no, I get it. I mean, the other part of it is just pointing out that here's a guy who was socially awkward. And again, and that's why I wanted to precede it with the thing about Dwight Schultz, because you could also just be saying, well, people who are into Star Trek are this nerdy, awkward, this guy you can't associate with real people. So, and again, that's this popular but unfair perception. But you have a guy like Dwight Schultz playing that, and I think through every effort of this episode, through the writing, through Dwight Schultz's performance, they definitely try to elevate it beyond something that could be perceived as that. So what I'm saying is I get where people could see it, but I also I do not think that was anywhere near the intention. Let me ask you something. If we didn't have Guinan here doing her Guinan thing, being the wise old sage of 10 Forward Lounge, would all of these other people have figured out what to do on their own? I mean, it took Geordi getting an order from his captain, but then sort of dragging his feet and complaining to the bartender, like, oh, I've got to work with this guy who I don't want to work with.
Yeah.
So
could we also talk about the fact that he's openly discussing problems with his subordinates in the bar with somebody who is not even a member of the crew, really? I mean, I know Picard considers her a member of the crew, but she is the bartender.
Right.
Yeah. There are a few questions of propriety. I know we're going to get to some of them in a bit, but yeah. Good thing she was there, and good thing that Geordi has zero boundaries when it comes to talking about his staff issues.
Right. Barclay does refer to a flux capacitor, and a lot of people know that. It's kind of an in-joke that in the previous scene it had been a flow capacitor mentioned by someone else in the crew, but then when he reiterates the story to Deanna, he messes it up as a flux capacitor, and that was an intentional little joke there. Thank you, Doc Brown. Ken, there's a lot of things that I'm kind of sad about not having in the 24th century. Remember way back when we talked about the Naked Now?
Yes. And nobody knew. You're upset that there are no parties. I know. Yeah. You're upset there are no parties. You're upset. I don't know. Are you upset that there are no Christmas parties or just parties in general? Wild
just parties in general.
Okay.
Parties in general. And I'm really upset that there are no dribble glasses in the 24th century.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of a magic trick, though, because it wasn't a dribble glass before, and then all of a sudden it was.
It's the best kind of dribble glass.
A magic dribble glass. Okay.
A magic dribble glass. That would be the thing. And I think we can all agree that I think we definitely like all the holodeck avatars of the crew. Like, that's just fun to see everybody step out of themselves and do something. It was like when we got to see Picard in Shakespeare doing his bit in Henry V. Like, that was just fantastic. But really, Tiny Riker. Tiny Riker is the best. I think that's just... If there's one takeaway from this episode, it's Tiny Riker.
What bothers me is, at least until the next episode, I will have the made-up lyric, "Hold Me Closer, Tiny Riker," playing through my memory. What pleases me is, so will you.
So you say one of the things that bothers you about the 24th century is the fact that nobody has wild parties anymore.
Right.
What was the other thing? I know we were just like, no dribble glasses.
No dribble glass, yeah.
So that's just being in the 24th century.
Right.
Living on a starship, though, you have put together just an incredible list of why you don't want to. Now, I don't see, a life of peeling potatoes on here.
I would think that a life of peeling potatoes would actually be okay.
As long as you don't have to do it on a starship.
As long as you don't have to do it on a starship, and as long as you don't have a lot of oversight. Because, all right, let's look at it from the top down. No privacy.
Okay.
First of all. And that is definitely explained to us with the fact that there are no locks on the holodeck door.
Yeah.
There's no doorbell. Or just, why doesn't anybody knock?
No sense of propriety.
None whatsoever.
Now, to Riker's credit, he did try to call, right?
He did.
Yeah, Geordi did not. Geordi left the bar, and maybe it's all the synthahol talking, but Geordi left the bar and went straight to the holodeck once he found out that's where he was. Didn't say, "Hey, Reg, why don't you meet me at 10 forward?" Or, "Hey, Reg, why don't you meet me in engineering?" Or, right. "Hey, Reg, cover up because I'm coming in."
Right. Right. Or how about a new thing? When you're running your holodeck program, but the door opens because somebody from the outside is coming in, the program changes. It's like having the escape button on a web browser.
Well, it's not necessarily going to dress you, though. That's the problem.
No. Well, fortunately, Barclay was fully dressed this entire time.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, I try to chalk it up to it being a work thing. Like, okay, if you are on the clock and you are on a holodeck, pretty much everything is, free reign. If you are on the clock, then somebody somewhere from this ship can and will find you and put you to work. So maybe we can let a little bit of that slide, but still, it's just a little weird to walk in on somebody when they're on the holodeck.
Do you think? Do you think every time we saw him, though, that he was actually on the clock? Because I know he was when Riker went looking for him.
Yeah, well, at least that one time for sure.
But the time that Riker tried to call, though, the time that Geordi went in, Geordi was off duty. Well, assuming. He was in 10 forward. He was talking business. Maybe this is like a 3-martini lunch where it's like,
right.
No, I was working in 10 forward.
Yeah. Let's see what else. There is no room for inadequacy on a starship. And it was kind of funny because Picard has that line where he says at the very beginning, "I'm not used to seeing," I forget the exact words, "I'm not used to seeing a review of my crew that is anything less than exemplary."
Not used to seeing a negative report about any of my crew, I believe it was.
Right, okay, there you go. And it just seemed sort of like Lake Wobegon. All the men are good looking.
All the women are strong and the children are
above average.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, okay, so you've never seen a negative review ever working on the Enterprise. Maybe any other ship. Maybe people are lying to you. Maybe this is not a good job for you to have.
That's funny.
And then there's no sympathy for inadequacy. There's no, it's sort of like, well, they're not adequate to do their jobs. Well, what's their problem? Like, get rid of that. Fix it. It's sort of not like, well, we kind of need to figure this out. It's just sort of like everybody is so stunned and shocked by the idea that somebody be performing to what is inadequate? 95% of the job, 99% of the job, 100% all of the time, which seems like torture to do a job. The other thing about the future, at least on a starship, is that people still make fun of you. for all the enlightened future that we have. And boy, they just get a big kick out of Barclay. That Wesley with the big book of Wesley jokes.
The big book of Wesley jokes. I like that. I actually tried to write a few of them. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So second week in a row that we have to question Riker's ability to command. I think.
Absolutely.
Last week in Tin Man, he was openly bad-mouthing Tam Elbrin to Geordi. Right. Just like straight up. Just absolutely like, oh yeah, I got a bunch of people I know killed. Don't like him, but pay attention to what he says because apparently we have to. This week he's calling a junior officer a name made up by a teenager.
Right.
And he's doing it behind the junior officer's back. And, then I started thinking I could actually picture him going around to everybody and like talking about all the nicknames that he's heard other people call, like people on the Enterprise. Like, there's Broccoli. Yeah. Right, that's funny. And there's Mesley.
Oh.
Yeah. That was really all I could think of. Although if anybody wants to email us or give us a call, because I tried for easily 45 seconds. I got to Mesley and then I quit.
That's it. Is it that you're not so good, or you think that they're not so good at coming up with nicknames? Because I have a feeling that they're not good at parties. They're not at a lot of things. They're probably not good at coming up with insults either.
That's fantastic. Maybe that's the reason Riker kept doing it, because nobody's done it in like 150, 200 years. Boy, Wesley is really smart. Do you know what he did?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let me take what you're saying about Riker, and let's just get this out in the open, okay? Riker's a jerk. He is seriously a jerk, and he is the guy who, up until now, can really dish it out. Boy, he puts on the smile, and he gets Picard a Horgon, and boy, he can really dish out a joke, but he cannot take it at all.
Right.
And I'm reminded of handful of people I've worked with at other jobs, charming, charismatic at first, and then you realize what a horrendous person they are. And I kind of thought that about Riker. Like, he's the guy, your first day on the Enterprise, you go, wow, this guy is cool. He's funny. Everybody likes him. And then by day 3, you're like, will he please shut up?
Well, it's even worse than that, though, because he's passing it along, right? I mean, because Wesley, and throwing Wesley under the bus at the same time. It really is kind of amazing. Because Wesley apparently, and side note, what is it about their relationship that makes Wesley think, oh, well, I can make fun of this guy, and the second in command of the ship will think it's funny because it's me, I guess. I don't know. But then Riker is actually reinforcing that bad behavior by telling everybody what a funny thing this is, but then making it clear that it was Wes who did it and not him. So when anything hits the fan, he's going to be holding Wes up like a shield.
Yeah, right.
It seems. Right. It's just it was, and it's quite possible, John, that you and I have been victims of name calling in the past, because boy, boy, are we latching onto this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everybody else is nice, though, or if they're not nice, they're at least concerned, or at least not a jerk.
Who?
That's kind of the standard that I'm holding. They're not a jerk about it.
You mean in general or in this episode? Because
in this episode.
Oh, I disagray. Who's nice in this episode? Who's nice to him except for Picard?
No, I'm setting the bar low. I'm saying at least not a jerk about it.
Okay. Well, Wes is actually using the name, right? He's the one who made up the name. Duffy actually uses the name just in like polite conversation, not even making a joke. He's like, "Yeah, Broccoli's a tool." This is not even. Troy is also nice to him, but it's kind of her job.
Yeah. I kept wondering if people are like this at Starfleet.
Yes.
I mean, what was this like, working your way up the ranks, and what does it say that Barclay kept passing?
Well, he is good. I mean, here's the thing. He is good. Geordi says, so Data figures the whole thing with the glass, right? And he says it's an unshielded power source. The glass probably came into contact with an unshielded power source. That's the only way this makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't make any sense because it's a glass. There aren't many places it could go, and how they're going to check all 4,000 power sources on the Enterprise because of glass. It's pretty much been in 10 forward the whole time.
Meanwhile, that stuff is shooting holes through their bodies with radiation. right. But oh my God, the glass.
Yeah. So, okay, but here's the thing. So they go over to, and Geordi really seems to think that this is basically just busy work, and I was just going to give it to Barclay. And it's almost like it's punishment because Barclay is Barclay. He's like, oh, I know just the guy to do this. Hey, Barclay, go do this thing that I don't want to do. And Barclay's like, oh, yeah, I was about to do that anyway, because it makes sense that this might actually work. So, I mean, Barclay's good at what he does when he actually gets to doing it.
Yeah.
When he gets around to it, I would say.
Yeah. But I don't know. There's something about the structure here that leaves some questions, because he made it through Starfleet being good but awkward, which is fine. You know, again, that should be fine in the greater scheme of things.
Yes.
But then he sort of keeps getting passed along because he's good but awkward everywhere he goes. And we know that he's already been sent to one ship, and now he's saying voluntarily, well, I'll go to another ship. I'll take myself out of this situation too. So maybe there's a hole in the way that this happens in the structure of Starfleet that lets this thing keep going, keep perpetuating. I ask myself, how do you solve a problem like Barclay? I mean, and not that his personality is a problem, because he's good at his job in the sense that he has knowledge. He's bad at his job in the sense that he doesn't show up, that he gets flustered, and that he doesn't speak up to actually solve the problem when he can. And Picard's answer to the people around him is, well, make him good at his job.
Right.
Make him do his job. And I know that I've been in situations like this before where I've been responsible for certain people at certain jobs, and you kind of take a look and you go, wow, for whatever reason, they can't do this, or they're not willing to do this. And that's the interesting thing about Barclay, is that he can do the thing, but he's not willing to do the thing because it's such a miserable experience for him. And I don't know, well, I think we'll get to this in the wrap-up, but I don't know that I'm satisfied with the answer of how all of this comes together.
Well, maybe we should save that to the wrap-up then.
Maybe we will.
Right.
It is interesting that, you know, if anybody is going to get Barclay, it's LaForge. and I really wish that there were more of that. I
love the fact, the problem is I actually remember that whatever it was that happened with LaForge in the holodeck is going to be revisited. I love the fact, though, that there's a certain level of discomfort around this. Geordi knows that what he did with Leah Brahms, or with the Leah Brahms simulation, may not be kosher. And I love the fact that all along the way, he's sort of trying to, you know, soften people to the idea of what he did, even though nobody knows what he did. He's like, yeah, Reg, I fell in love in the holodeck. And Reg's like, really? And Geordi's like, yeah, we're moving right past that.
Yeah, skip.
Yeah, and then when they walk into the holodeck and Riker's like, oh, this is a completely outside of protocol. Look at it. These are real people here. And Geordi's like, I don't think there's a rule that you can't use real people. Right. and then let's move along from why I'm worried about that.
Right. So let's talk about Barclay here a little bit more, because we got more than a few messages from listeners who really responded to Reg Barclay. He's a character with social anxiety disorder. I mean, at least that's one of the things that you can apply to kind of talk about his behavior. But I really think that the beauty of what's going on here is that his journey is so universal. I mean, we've kind of had some fun with the idea of this fantasy world of Star Trek and how difficult it is, and that structure that we kind of understand, and all of these perfect people around him who are perfect at their jobs, you know? But every single person, I don't care who you are, has at some point felt inadequate, out of place, like there is no one who gets you, so why even try? You know, there's a similar psychological thing to what we discussed last week with Tam Elbrin. He behaves the way he does partly because he's living up to the expectation of how others see him. And you can't just tell him to be different, because there's this endless cycle of perception driving his behavior. You know, it's almost a chicken or egg thing. Does the behavior drive the perception, or the perception drive the behavior? They're interlocked. And just telling Reg Barclay here, be different, be better, just do your thing, is not enough, and it's kind of tragic. that so many of these attempts to help this guy fail so horribly. And like I said before, I'm not totally satisfied that the end of it is actually a fix for what's going on.
Well, when you say so many attempts to help this guy, I mean, which attempts are you talking about?
Well, so they send him to therapy with Deanna.
Right.
And that's, granted, he pulls the plug on that, but it is partly Deanna's responsibility to follow up on that and get him the help that he needs. Mm-hmm. You have kind of let's call it the therapy of the workplace, of him doing his job and having the encouragement and support of the people around him in his workplace to do his job, to provide a condition in which he can do that and not be distracted and not feel inadequate, and all of these things. He should have the support of his superior officers to the extent that, well, let's just say that Picard is not really a people person, but the position that comes from the top down is, hey, don't make fun of this guy. That's inappropriate. Get him back to do his job. There is a kind of support there, even if it's, well, misunderstanding his, the baseline problem there. Maybe Guinan is the person that he should be talking to. Maybe it's not Geordi that should be having the conversation with Guinan, but Reg himself.
I think the only thing I would disagree with is I really think there's only one valid attempt to make things better for Reg, and it is Geordi actually talking to him like a person. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's ordered to by Picard, and ironically, what Picard says, because what Geordi wants to do first is send him off ship, right?
Yeah.
And Picard says, it's easy to transfer a problem to someone else. Too easy.
Yeah.
So, Geordi, take care of that. Right. I mean, Picard's not going to make him his project. For God's sake, he's the captain of a starship. But, head of engineering, also be this guy's best friend. He actually does say. And Geordi then is sort of like, yeah, go talk to somebody else. I mean, still with Deanna. But, I mean, she's not even aware, it doesn't seem, of what's coming. She actually shows up on the bridge and tells Geordi, I had an interesting meeting with one of your officers today. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't an attempt on Deanna's part to reach out to him, because how is she supposed to know? I mean, granted, she's a telepath, but how's she supposed to know, right? Somebody comes to her and says, I've got an issue. And then she, tries to work with that. But as far as reaching out to him, there was really only one valid attempt, I think, and it was the one made by Geordi. It's actually it's kind of weird that it takes, I don't know, him being hit in the head by it 9 times before he's finally like, I really should try to understand this guy.
and I guess let's just say that this is the one example of Deanna being not so good at her job as a telepath / empath.
Yeah.
That she's sitting in a room with this guy who is flustered. He is totally in love with her.
Yes.
Trying to hide that, which I'm sure Deanna has felt that from others before.
Yes.
So, that shouldn't be out of the ordinary or totally an unapproachable subject. But,
getting absolutely nothing off him.
She's just not reading him at all.
No.
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm no empath or telepath. Not
nope.
I can read people's thoughts kind of way. Maybe there's just so many conflicting things going on there that she doesn't even read the part about he's totally into me. Because, what's louder is he's totally not into talking to anybody or being outside.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe. I love one of those Dwight Schultz moments that you were talking about, but there's a fantastic exchange between Geordi and Barclay where Geordi says, you're just shy. And Barclay says, just shy. Doesn't sound serious, does it? Mm. And it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful delivery. It's a wonderful moment. And it says so much, especially to anybody who's ever been in that situation. I used to have this thing where, and I probably still do on some level. I used to have this thing where people I would meet would think that I hated them. One day I was having a discussion with a bunch of coworkers, and a good friend of mine was like, yeah, I thought you hated me when I first met you. And I was like, why? And he's like, because you just stood there and were quiet and didn't say anything. And to me, it's just, I'm shy around new people, or I was shy around new people.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've gotten over it some. And then he actually said to somebody else, didn't you think he hated you when you first met him? And it turns out it was a thing that was happening with everybody. So I mean, I actually loved like his delivery of that line because, people say I'm shy. and you think, well, you just get over it. But you don't realize how big a thing that can be.
Well, for any of us, I mean, whether it's shy or depressed or socially awkward or nervous or whatever, again, the wrong answer is always, well, just don't do that. Just get over that. I mean, how horribly insulting. And,
get confident, stupid.
Yeah. How terribly insulting and how dismissive of that problem, So there's this heartbreaking thing at the core of Barclay, but like I said, the beauty of it is that he is so relatable in some way universally, even if it's not to the extent that he's experiencing these problems. There's something really great about that. And by the way, did you tell that story about being perceived as hating people to tell me that you actually like me?
We'll talk about that some other time. There's another thing that I do want to hit, actually. There might be one other thing. I said that Geordi might be the only person to have actually reached out and tried to do something for Barclay. There is one other question that I had. Mm-hmm. So they're talking in engineering, and the thing in the glass doesn't make any sense, and the thing about the anti-grav thing doesn't make any sense, and Data says, maybe those are related. And then they go to the bridge, and Data says, hey, Barclay had this idea that these two things might be related. Is that Data reaching out? Is that Data caring? Is that Data trying to not sound stupid? And everybody thinks Barclay's stupid anyway, so let's go ahead and say that it was his idea. I mean, what was that? That was a surprising thing to have happen, and especially, like, if it had happened from one act to another act, you might have actually forgotten that it was Barclay's idea, not Data's. But it goes straight from, Data, have an idea, to Data saying, hey, Barclay had an idea. Mm-hmm. And it's the same idea.
Yeah, right.
What is that?
Yeah, maybe it's just a hole in the writing. Maybe it was, the writers' meeting saying, okay, well, we need to show that Barclay is making some progress here. And then, okay, so we'll get his name in the script there. But it didn't actually play out like that. Oops. I don't know. That's really hard to say. I don't think Data would be that invested in the emotional life of the people around him, just to try to make it better for somebody.
Okay.
I don't buy that.
All right. And the thing is, I'm not saying that is the case necessarily. Mm-hmm. I did have sort of, there's one time where I thought of Data as Pinocchio in this episode, and one time I thought of him as Jiminy Cricket. And I think he was Jiminy Cricket at that moment. I can't remember when I thought he was Pinocchio. But, I think it was when he was lying to the captain about, hey, don't worry about it. That mistake that you made, anybody could make. I'll be over here.
Reg has learned a lot this week. Now, let us see what we have learned from him.
Ken, some might say that Mission Log is a hollow pursuit, but I don't believe them. But today we're going to wrap up Hollow Pursuits, the episode of Next Generation in which we've met Reginald Barclay, and we ask ourselves, and I will ask you, does this episode hold up?
Yes. Yes, I believe so. I like Dwight Schultz. I like Reg. I love the holodeck stuff. I like the messages around it, which, of course, we'll get to actually sort of laying out what some of the messages are in a moment. Yeah, I think it works. I mean, is it? I don't know. There was definitely a big tech-to-tech section there.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of big tech-to-tech sections there, actually. And it's disappointing to see... what's the best way to put it? If you had one person writing the whole thing, then I don't think you would see the inconsistencies. We used to talk repeatedly about the gumbification of McCoy. Right. And we've got a definite gumbification of Riker and LaForge in this episode. Geordi is, generally speaking, a more understanding guy. And the first time we see him in this episode, I mean, real life him, he's barking at Barclay. And we've not seen that before. And it sort of bothers me that it's like, now, this week we need these guys to be dumb. So let's go ahead and make them dumb. Or this week we need them to be mean, so let's go ahead and make them mean. But the Dwight Schultz character is so good. And we actually do end up with a relationship. I feel like we end up with a relationship between Geordi and Barclay. So I'm willing to let those issues go. So that's me. I think it holds up. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with all of those reasons, and a few more that I think it works. It's always fun to see characters playing outside themselves. So the stuff actually on the holodeck is just fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, Tiny Riker's great. Fencing Picard is wonderful. They do that kind of thing with mirror episodes, alternate timelines, holodecks, whatever, however you want to get the characters to break out of themselves a little bit. But this is also a great character study. And specifically Barclay, and examines some of the themes that we've talked about on our show before. All that said, I kind of hate the ending. Barclay gets over his problems, and put that in air quotes if you want, at least for now. And I do know that we will have more of Barclay down the road, but let's just talk about this episode on its own for now. But, he happened to be a small part of the team that saved the day. Mm-hmm. What about the days when he's not that guy? There are all the days that led up to this day that he was not that guy. And then going forward, there will probably be many more days where he is not that guy. We see him delete his holodeck programs. Except for one. Except for one, So I don't buy that that's over. And yes, again, I know that it's not, but we're just talking about what we get here.
There's no reason to, forgive me, I feel like you're maybe being a tiny bit unfair, though. There's no reason to assume that everything's going to be fine or that everything's going to be over. Go to the Whedonverse when Willow was playing around with magics, and she was playing around with them a little too much. And that got to the point where she was lying to people about it. And then she finally did walk away a little bit, and then she ended up falling back into it. Or, if you've had the misfortune of helping an alcoholic in your life, how many times have you heard them say they're going to stop? I mean, I don't necessarily feel like everything is fine for Reg at the end of the episode. I feel like at the end of this episode, Reg feels like everything is fine for Reg. But the fact that he goes ahead and saves one program, I mean, he's already leaving it possible for himself to slide back in. And I'm not saying this whole thing is like a giant addiction issue, although it's funny because what did Geordi say? You're going to be able to write the book on holoddiction.
Holoddiction, yeah.
So they've actually got a term for it, unless he's just being clever right then, but whatever. I guess it holds up more for me because just because everything seems okay right now doesn't mean that everything's actually okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. I get it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm trying to watch this purely in the context that it was given, just purely with what we're given here, even though we know that there will be more of Reg. And I do feel like they're sort of dangling this idea in front of you that, well, today was a great day for Reg, and he really made some progress, even to the extent that we don't have to worry about him anymore.
Well, I feel like you're sort of drawing a line further than the 48 minutes, but okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I do think there's some other really cool things here. Like, I really love the idea, actually, of the holodeck as a counselor. Now, the problem is that Reg has programmed his version of Deanna to be his version of Deanna.
Yes.
But there's something kind of cool about the idea that you could program the holodeck for exactly what you need as a counselor for some kind of training or psychological support or therapy, because it might actually be easier in some respect to get along with that technology than a person. So, if a holodeck were to ever be a technology that is real, I think that's a great use for it. That's kind of cool. And I do like the exploration of the idea of ethics of recreating your fellow crew members. It's sort of weird because it shows that he's obsessive about work. He kind of can't get out of that. But on the other hand, it's still nobody's business what he does with those avatars. There's just so much here. And of course, the foundation of what's here is this great character that we're given. So unequivocally, I say that this holds up for sure. Now let's talk about messages.
Okay. Do you want me to, or do you want to? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it might have been an Allegiance when we talked about one of the messages being that everybody has a part to play. Because wasn't there there was the sort of the cowardly person, and there was the sort of just like all brawn person. But they all had to come together to finally make something happen. That's much more evident in this episode. I mean, that this guy who could have been totally discounted, this guy who could have totally been just, got no part to play. I mean, he actually ends up being the one to save the ship. Now, of course, you kind of know that kind of thing's going to happen because we're concentrating him an awful lot, but still, it is sort of neat to see that play out. We've also talked a lot of times about people stepping up more when more is expected of them, and we get that here. Geordi says, come sit at the big kids table. You know what I mean? Or come sit at the cool kids table, or come sit at the grown-up table. And he goes to sit at the grown-up table, and it turns out he has grown-up things to offer that nobody had really expected, because they've just sort of been like, he talks funny and he's uncomfortable and he got here 7 seconds late and he's useless. And it turns out, no, you just, kind of have to maybe meet him where he is a little bit, but then suggest that he come meet you where you are too. There's also a reminder here to think outside the box. They're all looking for connections that are logically... they're looking for logical connections, but they are connections that are logically not there. And so Reg gets illogical in his thinking, or gets creative in his thinking, which is a big part of what Guinan had been talking about what a creative guy Reg was. And, of course, it's his creative thinking that saves the day. So I hate the term think outside the box, but it's a great term. I hate it. I don't think it's a great term, but what's the science line? I know I've said it before. I've used it before. The most interesting scientific experiments or scientific thought comes not from that's interesting, but that's funny.
Yeah.
I can't
it's
remember
not a Eureka moment. It's the that's funny or that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, it's not even that's interesting. It's that's funny.
Yeah,
I know, because I remember thinking that's awesome. So there are a bunch of sort of neat messages like that, I suppose. What about you?
I agree with all of that. I like that we learn a little more about the other characters around Reg-Barclay. It's one of those situations where, like we were talking about with Lal in The Offspring, that the direction for the writer there, Renee Echeverria, was you have to, if you're creating a character, that creator has to support what we know about other characters. And we get a little bit of that here. It's a little rough going, I would say, at some points. We get some insight into Geordi. We get a little more insight into Guinan. Riker comes across as a jerk. I really wondered about Picard at some point because, as I said before, he's not a people person. But I even felt like in this, he had softened up a little bit. If this had been first season Picard, he would have destroyed LaForge the minute he said broccoli.
Yeah.
And LaForge is just sort of like, we're at the bar and we're still making this joke. Oh, wait, what was that thing my captain told me? Oh, yeah. Don't do that. Right. Yeah. So there's other stuff in the surrounding relationships that are cool, and it's fun to see the moments of realization with Riker and Deanna, the moment of realization when they meet their holodeck avatars. All that stuff is great. I think that a message that I would go with that kind of piggybacks on your first message is this idea that Star Trek has shown us the times when our enemy, and that's in big air quotes as well, is not our enemy. And in this case, rather than the enemy, it's the guy right under our noses who shouldn't be overlooked at best, or treated as an outcast at worst. Everyone has value. Everyone has a contribution to make. We're not always so good as individuals living up to that. So I'm glad that they present this as part of the character journey too, not just sort of the hit you over the head lesson, but this idea of people having to learn this along and maybe not always making the best decisions and maybe not always having the right answer when it comes to working with Barclay. But this is a deep, multifaceted character who I know we'll get to see more of.
And I'm assuming that we think that all of those messages do hold up.
I'm assuming that I agree with that, too.
All right, there you go, then. Then we should let people know that Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more about all the good work and other work that Roddenberry does at roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, be sure to check out Trek FM, that is trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
And next week, we are back with The Most Toys.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. I am not sure what the problem is with the holodeck simulations of real people. I run simulations of John and Ken all of the time. Sometimes I even let the simulations do the show. I am wondering now whether I should have told you that. End transmission.